Hi, everybody. Welcome to the weekly SDSU Center for Autism Research Spotlight, where we are highlighting the wonderful research that's being conducted by our center members. Our aim is to both take advantage of the stay-at-home orders that we're experiencing during this COVID-19 pandemic, and also to showcase the work that our center is doing in the San Diego autism community. My name is Janice Chan, and I'm the administrative coordinator at the center.
I'm Vinton Omaleki. I'm the Community Engagement Director. Today we are speaking with Dr. Rachel Haine-Schlagel, a licensed psychologist and associate professor in the Department of Child and Family Development and an investigator at the Child and Adolescent Services Research Center. Thank you so much, Rachel, for stopping by and speaking with us.
Sure, thank you for having me.
So Dr. Haine-Schlagel, let's go ahead and get started. We'd love to hear about just generally what area of autism research you focus in.
Sure, so I focus in the more generally in the services side of autism research. So what's sort of happening out in the community with providers providing services to families, to clients. So that's sort of generally the area I focus on. And then within services research, right now I'm focusing on how parents and providers or caregivers and providers can work together to really make services as effective as possible for children who are on the spectrum. That's sort of generally what I'm doing right now.
Great.
And so I want to know why is this research important, and then kind of like, why is it exciting to be in this line of work?
Great questions. So this area of research is important because, well, for some real practical reasons, that any provider spends way less time with a child than their caregivers. So caregivers have so much more opportunity to provide support and help kids with autism learn new skills. And so the parents and caregivers are just a really, really critical part of effective service delivery. So that's one reason. Another reason is that a lot of providers, so I'm a child psychologist, so I focus on working with children, adolescents, and families. And many times, and this is not always the case at all, but many times providers went into this field because they love working with children. And oftentimes most of their training is on how to work with children. So there's sort of a mismatch because parents and caregivers are so important for services to be effective. And sometimes providers may not have the skills or the confidence to really engage parents in the service delivery, in the process of sort of that teaching process, coaching process. So those are a couple of big reasons why the work is so important. Why it excites me personally is I've always been interested in parents and parenting, even back in undergrad. And I really see how important it is, especially for children with autism, for parents to feel supported and like they're really able to work collaboratively with providers. So that's just really important to me.
Man, I think about like how things are right now in this age where like parents are expected to be homeschooling their kids, but never actually been given like the tools to do so. And so I can see how really important and how relevant your research is, like even now, in the midst of what we're going through right now. Could you tell us a little bit about you shared you're a psychologist. How did you get into this line of work?
Sure. So like I said, I've always been interested in parents and parenting. And I actually, my training was with child mental health problems, not autism specific services, more child disruptive behavior problems or child anxiety, depression, things like that. And I've done quite a bit of work in that area, sort of figuring out how to support therapists and caregivers in working together. And in the last, it's many years now, I've just sort of started working with some colleagues at the our SDSU Center and other colleagues in the San Diego area really working on how to sort of take some of the things I've been doing in mental health services and shift them over to autism services. For as I said earlier, for autism, really parents are just absolutely critical for services to be effective. So most of my work has been really sort of translating in autism, has been translating some of the work that I did in child mental health services and also in child welfare services over to autism services.
So can you tell us a little bit about your most recent project, and then also kind of what you hope to work on in the future?
Sure. So some of my most recent work has been in the area of the diagnostic evaluation for autism. In most cases, a child receives a sort of a formal evaluation from a psychologist or from a developmental behavioral pediatrician. And that sort of official diagnosis kind of opens the door to whatever services that child may need. It starts that family on that kind of path of sort of figuring out how to get support for their child and give their child help their child build the skills that they need to build. And I've sort of realized collaboratively with some folks that were at Rady Children's Hospital that have moved on since, that the diagnostic evaluation was kind of like a really critical part of this process that really wasn't getting a lot of attention. That it's a very stressful experience for families. It can be a stressful experience for providers too. They've got limited time. They're making big decisions. They don't have a lot of time for communication. They don't have a lot of opportunity to follow up with families because of the nature of what they do in their job. So I've started the last few years working with some psychologists that provide diagnostic evaluations at Rady Children's Hospital to develop a toolkit to help the psychologists really tailor the feedback process. So, after you do their clinical interview is usually pretty standard. The tests they do, they've learned how to give the tests. It's that feedback part where you're talking to a family about what you've learned and what you think is going on. That's the real sort of the art and the most critical part of that diagnostic evaluation. And families are really different. Caregivers and parents are really different in the way that they what they bring, when they're sort of coming to an evaluation. Some might be relieved and ready, like I know something's been going on and I just need to know what it is, and then we can work on it. Others are completely overwhelmed or extremely sad, just sort of fearful, those kinds of really strong emotions. Other families can be reluctant. They might not see as many of the challenges their child is having as the psychologist is or as the school is. They might have other children that maybe have similar challenges and just don't necessarily see it as autism. And so all these different, and those are just a few examples, but all these different kinds of families come to psychologists and others for evaluations. And my work really focuses on trying to help providers sort of tailor how they talk to families to really promote initiating services. So that diagnostic evaluation, you leave there with a diagnosis, maybe with a piece of paper, and sometimes there's some support for you after. Sometimes there's not, and you're really on your own. And so I'm trying to sort of help that evaluation be as helpful for families as possible.
Yeah, that's so important because, and Janice knows this, we in our focus groups and things like that, we've heard from parents that it's just completely can be overwhelming from that moment on. So it's really wonderful that you're working to make sure that best practice being done from this really critical point onward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so my most recent work has really been, after this toolkit was kind of designed, has been providing training to psychologists. We did a study with psychologists at Rady Children's Hospital, and we just finished doing some training with psychologists that are vendored by Regional Center to provide diagnostic eligibility evaluations for early start or Regional Center eligibility. And we've been primarily working with providers, training providers, and then following up with them and asking them what they think about the training, have they used parts of the toolkit, how we can improve it. So that's some of the work we've been doing. We were able to do a little bit of work interviewing parents to see what parents' experience of their evaluation was. Had they obtained the report? Had they gone on to initiate any of the services that were recommended? We have a little bit of information on that, but mostly we've been working with providers. And what I hope to do in the future is build a more intensive training. Right now, it's really just a 2-hour training that we do. But I would love for there to be some follow-up consultation meetings to really help providers utilize the skills, and also sort of further develop the training to maybe take into account some of the really complex situations that families sometimes present with. And then follow up and really see if families are initiating services sooner, to see if we're really hitting that goal of helping families sort of get to that place where there's already so many barriers to obtaining services, but for families to sort of be as ready as they can to take that on and get on the phone and really advocate for their child.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's great. Currently, what kinds of resources might be available to families or even providers that are kind of seeking to, be more supported in this area?
Great question. So for providers, it's really hard to say. There's not a lot of resources out there. That's primarily why we're doing this work. So I don't really have a lot of good suggestions for providers other than to be thinking about tailoring and be thinking about each family being unique, and even when your day is going hard, challenging, and things like that. Mm-hmm. For families, there are a few resources that I would recommend. Autism Speaks is a foundation and a website that has a lot of resources, and they do have for example, a decision aid tool for families to work with providers on deciding whether their child should be prescribed medication. There are some other sort of resource guides for families. So nothing specific to the diagnostic evaluation, but more for kind of treatment. So Autism Speaks has some resources. There's a website that's run by the division of the American Psychological Association that focuses on child and adolescent clinical psychology, called effectivechildtherapy.org. And that has a lot of information about effective treatments for families, and some information on questions to ask providers to sort of help them really be engaged in the service process, the service initiation and delivery process. And then there's actually a website out of Hawaii, a colleague of mine developed, that's a little Hawaii specific, but also has a lot of really good resources more generally. It's called Help Your Kiki. Kiki is child in Hawaiian. Mm-hmm. And got some really nice questions to ask providers. And it's a much smaller site than the other two, so it's a little more manageable. And there is a specific section on autism in that website, as well as in the effectivechildtherapy.org website.
Great. Yeah, so we'll get those links for you, and then we'll post them on under the video, and then we'll be sharing that on our social media platforms too. So, well, thank you so much, Rachel, for sharing your expertise with our community. We really appreciate your time, Dr. Haine-Schlagel, and the impact that you're making in the autism community and in research.
Well, thank you, and thank you guys for all you do for our center. You're incredibly valuable team members.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. So, audience, if you want to learn more about our center and our center members, you can find us at autism.sdsu.edu.
Or you can find us on social media as well. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Our handle for all three of those is at SDSU Autism. And so we'll see you next week for our next research spotlight. Until then, we hope that you stay safe, stay healthy, and stay connected.